Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People's Story. 6 months ago, I inherited my grandparents' old farmhouse. It sits on about 5 acres of land that's been in my family for generations, just outside the city limits in an unincorporated area. The place needed work. The roof had seen better days, the porch was sagging, and the interior hadn't been updated since the 1970s. But it had good bones, and more importantly, it held all those childhood memories of summers spent helping Grandpa tend his vegetable garden and collect eggs from the chicken coop. I quit my office job in the city and moved out to the farm full-time. Over the past several months, I've been slowly restoring the old place while trying to maintain its rustic charm. I replaced the roof with weathered-looking metal that matched the original style, fixed up the wraparound porch, and updated the plumbing and electrical. Inside, I kept the original hardwood floors and even restored my grandmother's vintage kitchen cabinets instead of replacing them. Outside, I rebuilt the chicken coop and added a small enclosure for 2 goats I adopted from a rescue. I also expanded Grandpa's vegetable garden and planted heirloom varieties from seeds he'd saved over the years. It wasn't much, but it was becoming self-sufficient, and I was proud of it. The only downside was watching the farmland around me disappear. When I was a kid, you could see for miles in every direction, just fields and a few scattered farmhouses. Now there's a fancy housing development about half a mile down the road. They broke ground about 2 years ago, and the houses there sell for 7 figures. It's all manicured lawns, 3-car garages, and swimming pools, a stark contrast to my humble farmhouse with its functional vegetable garden and free-ranging chickens. I kept to myself mostly, waving to the occasional neighbor who drove by, but otherwise focused on my own projects. That all changed one Saturday morning in early spring when I was out front repairing my fence. A shiny black SUV pulled up my gravel driveway, kicking up dust that made me frown. 2 people stepped out, a man and a woman, both dressed like they were headed to a business meeting rather than visiting a farm. The woman wore a crisp pantsuit and heels that immediately sank into the soft ground, while the man had on pressed khakis and a button-down with the sleeves rolled up in what I assumed was his idea of casual. "Can I help you?" I called out, setting down my hammer. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning. I'm the president of the neighborhood committee, and this is our treasurer. We're here to talk to you about some important matters regarding your property." I wiped my hands on my jeans and approached them, noticing how they both subtly looked around at my place with barely disguised distaste. "What about my property?" I asked. The man cleared his throat. "We've had some concerns from residents about the appearance of your farm. It's having a negative impact on property values in our community." I blinked, confused. "Your community is half a mile away. How does my farm affect your property values?" The woman opened a leather portfolio and pulled out some glossy photos. These were taken from the main road. Your livestock areas and vegetable gardens are clearly visible, not to mention the state of the buildings. She gestured to my barn, which I'll admit needed a fresh coat of paint. "Okay," I said slowly. "But again, this is my private property, and it's not connected to your development in any way." That's when they dropped the bomb. "Actually," the man said with an uncomfortable smile, "our association has expanded its jurisdiction to include outlying properties that impact our community's aesthetic. We're here to present you with membership documents." He handed me a thick envelope. I opened it and nearly choked when I saw the monthly dues, $500. As I flipped through the pages, I saw rules prohibiting livestock of any kind, restrictions on growing vegetables in visible areas, and requirements to maintain a specific type of lawn. There was even a color chart showing the approved paint colors for exterior buildings, various shades of beige and gray, none of which matched my farmhouse's traditional red with white trim. "This is ridiculous," I said, handing the packet back. "My property isn't part of your development. I'm in an unincorporated area outside city limits. Your HOA has no jurisdiction here." The woman's smile tightened. "I think you'll find that recent zoning changes have brought your property under our umbrella. It would be in your best interest to comply." "What zoning changes? I haven't received any notification about that." "The paperwork is probably still in process," she said dismissively, "but we're here as a courtesy to inform you before any official actions need to be taken." I stood my ground. "I'm not joining your HOA. This farm has been in my family for generations, and I intend to keep it as a working farm. If you have concerns about looking at my chickens from half a mile away, maybe plant some trees." The man's friendly facade slipped a bit. "You should reconsider. Properties that fail to comply often find themselves facing significant fines and legal challenges. It would be a shame if maintaining this rustic lifestyle became financially untenable for you. Are you threatening me? I asked incredulously. Not at all, the woman said. Simply stating facts. We'll leave the paperwork with you to review. We expect your signed agreement within 10 days. They left the envelope on my porch railing and walked back to their SUV. As they drove away, the man rolled down his window and called out, "Remember, 10 days." I watched them disappear down the road, a knot forming in my stomach. I knew I wasn't subject to their jurisdiction, but their confidence bothered me. That evening, I called a buddy who works in the county land office to ask about any zoning changes. He confirmed what I suspected. There had been no changes to my property's status. I was still in an unincorporated area, not subject to any HOA relieved. I put the incident out of my mind and went back to my projects. I had seedlings to transplant and a section of barn roof to patch. About a week later, I woke up to my dogs barking frantically around 6 a.m. I threw on some clothes and rushed outside to find my front gate knocked off its hinges, 2 garden beds completely trampled, and my hand-painted farm sign splintered on the ground. Worst of all, someone had spray-painted the side of my barn with the words, "Clean up or get out." I was furious. I called the sheriff's department immediately, and a deputy came out to take photos and file a report. He was sympathetic, but not optimistic. "Without witnesses or camera footage, it's going to be hard to prove who did this," he told me. I had my suspicions, of course, but no proof. After the deputy left, I drove to the hardware store and bought several security cameras. I spent the rest of the day installing them around my property, at the gate, covering the barn, the house, and the areas where I kept my animals. I wasn't taking any chances. 3 days later, my investment paid off in the worst possible way. It was just after midnight when my phone alerted me to motion detected at the front gate. I checked the live feed and saw 4 figures approaching my property. I recognized 2 of them immediately. The HOA representatives who had visited me. The other 2 were men I hadn't seen before, both carrying what looked like cans of spray paint and tools. I called the sheriff's department while watching in horror as these people systematically vandalized my property. They spray painted my newly repaired fence, dumped something in my garden beds, and worst of all, one of them took out a chainsaw and approached the ancient apple tree my grandfather had planted as a young man. By the time sheriff's deputies arrived, the group had fled, but not before cutting halfway through the trunk of that 100-year-old tree. I showed the deputies the security footage, clearly capturing the faces of all 4 individuals. "That's solid evidence," one deputy said, looking grim. "We can definitely pursue vandalism and trespassing charges with this." The next morning, I backed up all the footage and took it to a lawyer who specialized in property rights. After watching just a few minutes, she was seething. "This is blatant harassment and criminal property damage," she said. "And if they've been threatening other property owners with false claims about jurisdiction, we might be looking at attempted fraud as well." While she prepared legal documents, I went to work saving my grandfather's apple tree. I called in an arborist who managed to stabilize it with cables and treated the wound. It would be touch and go, but there was hope it might survive. 2 days later, I received an official-looking letter in the mail. It was from the HOA claiming that due to numerous violations of community standards, I was being fined $2,500 with additional daily fines of $100 until I brought my property into compliance. The letter stated that my property had been incorporated into their jurisdiction through community expansion provisions approved by county planning and zoning. I immediately called my friend at the county office again. "That's absolute nonsense," he said after I read him the letter. "They're making this up. Your property hasn't been rezoned, and HOA can't just unilaterally expand their boundaries anyway. That's not how any of this works." My lawyer was equally appalled when I showed her the letter. "They're doubling down even after committing criminal acts on your property. This shows a pattern of harassment and fraud that strengthens our case." Things moved quickly after that. The sheriff's department brought in the 4 individuals from my security footage for questioning. The 2 HOA representatives initially tried to deny everything, but when faced with the video evidence, they started blaming each other. Meanwhile, my lawyer helped me file for a temporary restraining order against all 4 individuals and the HOA as an entity. She also filed a civil lawsuit for property damage, harassment, and fraud. During discovery, we found something shocking. I wasn't the only victim. The HOA had been targeting several other properties on the outskirts of their development, all with similar tactics. Some neighbors had actually paid the fake fines out of fear, or sold their properties at below-market rates to escape the harassment. Further investigation revealed that the HOA president, The woman who'd visited me owned a stake in the development company building the housing community. They were trying to acquire surrounding properties to expand their development, using intimidation and fraud when people wouldn't sell willingly. I reached out to these neighbors, and soon we had organized a group of 8 property owners, all with similar stories. My lawyer amended our lawsuit to a class action. The local newspaper got wind of the story, and a reporter showed up at my farm to interview me. I showed her the security footage, the damaged property, and the fraudulent HOA documents. 2 days later, our story was front-page news. Local HOA accused of fraud and property vandalism in land grab scheme. The public backlash was immediate and intense. Residents of the development who'd had no idea what their HOA was doing in their name were outraged. Many showed up at my farm offering to help repair the damage. One retired carpenter even volunteered to build me a new farm sign to replace the one they'd destroyed. 3 months after that first visit from the HOA representatives, the criminal and civil cases came to their conclusions. All 4 individuals involved in the vandalism were charged: trespassing, criminal property damage, and in the case of the HOA officers, fraud and conspiracy charges as well. Our class action lawsuit was settled out of court. The HOA insurance company, eager to distance themselves from the scandal, agreed to substantial damages for all affected property owners. I used part of my settlement to install better security, repair all the damage, and set up a proper irrigation system for my expanded garden. The County Board of Supervisors, embarrassed by the whole affair, passed new zoning regulations specifically protecting agricultural properties from development pressure. They also implemented stricter oversight of HOA operating in the county. As for the HOA itself, the homeowners voted out the entire board and elected new representatives who promised transparency and respect for neighboring properties. Several of the development's residents have become regular customers at the small farm stand I set up at the end of my driveway. Grandpa's apple tree survived. It doesn't produce as many apples as it used to, but the arborist says it could live another 50 years with proper care. Sometimes when I sit under it in the evening, watching my chickens scratch in the yard and my goats playing on their climbing structures, I think about how close I came to losing all of this. I don't regret standing my ground. This land has been in my family for generations, and thanks to that security camera footage and a good lawyer, it will stay that way. I think my grandfather would be proud not just that I protected his farm, but that I helped other neighbors protect theirs too. Sometimes you have to take a stand, not just for yourself, but for what's right. The best part? When I'm gathering eggs or harvesting vegetables, I can look down the road and see the fancy houses in the distance, and know that my little farm will remain exactly as it should be. A home, not just a house on a developer's map. The next one is a Malicious Compliance's story. Recently, my friend told me a story from his life that's a perfect fit for Malicious Compliance, and I decided to share it from his perspective. This happened about 5 years ago when I was working at a small tech repair shop. Our boss was this guy named Sergey, a classic control freak who thought being the boss made him smarter than everyone else. He didn't know squat about tech, but loved sticking his nose in and telling us how to do our jobs. Usually us guys in the shop would just nod and do it our way, but this time I decided to play by his rules. And here's what came of it. We got an order to fix an old industrial printer. Rare beast, bulky, barely any manuals, but I'd worked on a couple before, so I knew right away what was wrong. A clog in one of the feed gears and a worn-out belt. Disassemble, clean, swap a few parts, 5 hours tops. I laid out the plan for Sergey. He listened, then launched into his usual, "No, you don't get it. It's an electrical issue. You need to check the board, test everything with a multimeter. I'm the boss here. Do it my way." I tried explaining it was mechanical, but he started yelling that I was young, cocky, and clueless, and if I didn't follow his orders, I could go home without pay. Fine, I thought. You're the boss. You know best. Grabbed the multimeter, took the printer apart down to the last screw, and started testing every circuit on the board, exactly like he told me. It was slow, tedious, and totally pointless, because I knew from the start the board wasn't the issue, but I didn't just test it. I documented everything for a report. Wrote down readings, snapped pics of every step, even sketched diagrams so Sergey could see how obedient I was. Took me 2 full days when I could have fixed the thing in half a day. Finally, I stroll up to him with a stack of papers and say, "Sergey, checked it all, board's fine, what now?" He turned red as a beet. The client had already called, furious about the delay. At that point, he figured I'd sabotaged him on purpose, though he dug his own grave, and barked at me to deal with the mechanics since you're so smart. I shrugged, went back, cleaned the gears, swapped the belt, the stuff I'd planned to do all along. A day later, the printer was done. Client was happy, but Sergey looked like he'd been through a week-long spin cycle. After that, he tried bossing me around a couple more times, but I'd just ask, like with that printer, your way? And he'd shut up real quick. Moral of the story, sometimes it's better to let someone dig their own hole than argue. I knew I was right, but I complied out of spite, and he ended up screwing himself. Still crack up thinking about his face after that report. The next one is a pro-revenge story. When I was at uni, I started dating this guy. At first, he was wonderful, dedicated to his studies, fun to be around, attentive, and always surprising me with things, working hard at his job, etc. Then, bit by bit, things unraveled. He started skipping classes, then he barely bothered to go at all. Worse still, he never helped around the house. Never washed up, cleaned up, did laundry, nothing. He was even fired from his job for too many no-shows. All he wanted to do was sit at home and play Xbox or browse the message boards and forums. This was in the days before social media, when dinosaurs roamed the earth. This left me having to pick up extra shifts, sometimes double and triple shifts, all while going to class and studying. I later learned that this was a pattern for him. He'd be really dedicated to whatever he set his heart on, but then get bored and fall back into old bad habits. Then he'd find a new passion and rinse and repeat. I knew I should have ended the relationship much sooner, but I held out hope that he would snap out of it, that maybe it was just exam stress getting to him. I desperately wanted things to go back to how they were, but it was not meant to be. I caught him cheating and threw him out. I was so stressed with everything that it wasn't until the next day that our joint savings account crossed my mind. There was a little over £5,000 in there, and bar a few hundred from him, the rest was money I had saved. I checked the account, and it was all gone. My ex had cleaned out the account and moved into a new flat with his side chick. I called the bank. There was nothing they could do. He was authorized on the account. I contacted the police. They told me there was nothing they could do since it was a joint account, so nothing criminal had happened. They suggested taking it to civil court, but said I'd probably spend more money than I got back in legal fees, so it likely wasn't worth it. My ex had stolen £5,000 and there was nothing I could do about it. I felt like such an idiot. I got even angrier when I saw his posts on various forums boasting about his new game consoles, new games, new TVs and gadgets, all bought with my money. I'm not usually a vengeful person, petty on occasion, sure, but I've never wanted to exact revenge as much as I did right then, and I knew just how to do it. While I was a student, I temped every summer to help pay for my studies. One such job had been for a debt collection agency. The work was as crappy as you can imagine, but it paid really well, and it was only for a few months. My ex had been dodging debt for many years, and he was very proud of that fact. He was also proud of the fact that his debt was close to being statute barred, and he hadn't paid a penny. For those of you who don't know, in the UK, creditors have about 6 years to collect a debt, and then it becomes statute barred. That means the money is still owed, but creditors have no legal way to enforce payment, such as using bailiffs. My ex was a few months away from reaching statute-barred status. However, what a lot of people don't know is that making a payment on that debt resets the clock. If you pay any amount, then that 6 years starts from scratch. Previously, I had used my insider knowledge to help him dodge the debt. Now I would use it to hit him where it hurt. By the end of our relationship, I was handling everything, including his debts. I had the paperwork, so I knew who he owed and how much. I called his creditors up. I was honest and said I was a friend calling to make a payment on his behalf. I didn't pretend to be him because that would be a big legal no-no. They weren't allowed to disclose any details, but they were able to take payment. I paid the minimum I could on each debt, about £1 on most, but one had a minimum payment of £1.50. It was the best £8.50 I have ever spent. I also made sure to give them his new address and contact details, as well as his parents' address. Having worked in the biz, I knew they wouldn't change the address since I wasn't the account holder, but they would note it. They had various systems where they could search for his name against that address and see if anything came up. If they got a hit, they'd change the address. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait. A few months rolled by, then it happened. His posts on the forums went from boasting about his new gaming PC to panic about a court date. He called me and begged for advice. I told him to F off. Seeing I wouldn't help, he asked for advice in the forums. One of his online friends told him not to turn up to court, that way they wouldn't be able to prosecute without him there. It was terrible advice that was 100% untrue. In fact, not showing up is one of the worst things you can do, especially in civil court. This was getting better and better. The court date came and went. My ex, naturally, didn't go. A few weeks later, my ex posted photos of his empty flat. Bailiffs had cleaned him out and taken every last one of his shiny new gadgets and toys. On top of that, he ended up with several CCJs, county court judgments. These are a big deal and can seriously damage your credit history, making it hard to get bank accounts outside of basic ones, near impossible to get credit, including getting a mortgage, and it can also make it hard to rent a place since many landlords don't like renting to people with CCJs as they're considered high risk. He also won't be able to find jobs in the financial sector. Now that he was broke and didn't have nice things, his side chick left him. I never got my 5,000 pounds back, but it felt good to see everything he bought with his ill-gotten gains taken away. Hope that 5,000 pounds was worth it. For anyone wondering how a student accrued 6 years of debt, he started at the university I attended when he was 25. He had initially gone to a different university at 18, but dropped out at 19 and went into the world of work. Then he convinced his parents to fund a business degree. He wanted to become an entrepreneur. And for anyone worried about the age gap, I deferred my uni start date by a few years so I could travel. I was 22 when we started dating. He was 26. The next one is an entitled People Story. So I've recently come to realize my brother loves to scam family and does not like it when he gets caught. A petty example would be in 2020. When restaurants were starting to reopen in the UK, I, then 26, was going out and my brother, then 28, asked me to bring back a Five Guys meal costing $20. He promised to pay me back. I obliged and gave him the meal once I returned home. He didn't have the money right then, but promised he would pay it back soon. Around 2 days later, around 11 p.m. in the evening, he approached me in the living room, asking for a massage whilst we watched anime, something he'd regularly request, saying his back was aching badly due to working as a physiotherapist. This time I said no. I said I'm not going to do a favor like that for him until he paid me back the money he owed me. He immediately got defensive and aggressive, shouting stuff like, "You're seriously not going to do it?" Hurling insults. And when I insisted I won't do anything until he pays me, he shouts, "You should have reminded me!" I point out, "It shouldn't be on me to have to remind you." He stormed off immediately. To this day, he still hasn't paid me. I cut him off the following year. Although the above example was rather petty, I bring this up because of something my dad told me a couple of weeks ago. It turned out my dad and brother had some deal where my dad would handle his phone bill and my brother would give him the money each month. Apparently, my dad realized he'd forgotten about this for months. He approached my brother and asked him if he could pay back the around 200 pounds he owed him. Keep in mind, my brother earns over 4,000 pounds a year and lives with my parents rent-free, so money is no issue. Apparently, his response was to throw a fit, shouting at my dad and then sending him 2,000 pounds instead, despite my dad's protests. I told my dad that he was using an abuse tactic by overpaying him in an attempt to make my dad feel guilty and put him in the wrong when my dad's request was more than reasonable. I also have no doubt my brother didn't just forget to pay my dad either. No doubt he was trying to see how long he could do this for edit. I haven't spoken to him in 4 years. Cut him off completely after he screamed at me for never talking to him and then trying to out me as trans. I moved out in 2021. The next one is an entitled parent story. My 45F mother, 71F, have a difficult relationship. My mother was an old-school traditional wife. She was a homemaker, never did any work outside the house, had far more kids than what I think is healthy, 7 girls and 6 boys. She is originally from Guatemala and came to the U.S. when she was 14. She married my father here, had her family here, and tried to make sure myself and my siblings had old-school values, something she really failed at. Most of my siblings are as far from my mother as humanely possible. 2 of them sadly passed away. I'm the only one that stayed near to take care of my parents, and since Dad died, I've taken my mother's bills so she can live easy. She's always been a dramatic headache, especially when it came to my marriage. She babied my husband, always took his side. I only wanted 1 kid, but my husband wanted as many as biologically possible. He had told me he also only wanted 1 when we talked about marriage. My mother helped him mess with my birth control, so I got pregnant with my youngest. I don't regret my youngest daughter, but after she was born, I secretly had my tubes tied. My mother always berated me for being faulty, since I only had 2 children. That's not counting how she berated me for marrying old. I married at 22, she married at 16. My husband was 49 when he died in a car crash recently. We shared 2 daughters, 14 and 16. He was also having an affair with a girl since 2020. The girl was 24 when she died. Together, they had twin boys early this year who thankfully survived the crash. My daughters found out the affair first when their father took them to the hospital to meet the babies and told the girls to keep it secret from me. They didn't, and my husband became abusive towards them and myself. We were in the divorce process when he died. When my husband's affair came out, my mother blamed me. She said it was because I was a working woman that didn't please her husband, that I didn't give him enough children, that I was pretty anymore. I'm not gonna say I'm super attractive, but I think I look good for my age. I've kept my weight well enough and I look relatively young for my actual age. But no, according to my dear mother, I wasn't good enough for my husband who needed a girl closer in age to our daughters than to him. She also was on the group of people angry at me when I refused to adopt my husband's affair children. Her newest crazy is she's trying to find husbands for my daughters, mainly focused on my eldest. This crazy plan started this week when my eldest came out to us. I had an idea, and I'm happy she felt comfortable enough in this massive mess we're in to still tell me and her sister. My daughter also decided to tell my mother about it. My mother just ended the call, then called me to scream about how confused and sick my daughter is. She's linked me conversion camps, psychologists that claim homosexuality is a sickness, wackos in my opinion, political articles, etc. She even wanted to see about doing an exorcism. I told her to stop it or she would be in no contact with my in-laws. She stopped for literally 24 hours. Next thing I get is a Facebook message from a man in his mid-20s asking if it was true that I was looking to marry out my 16-years-old daughter. I told him he was sick and blocked him. I got 6 more through the night. Then my mother called saying she found husband prospects for my girls, my high school age girls. Angry has been an understatement. She even gave some of these men my daughter's cell phone numbers. We're all getting new phone numbers tomorrow, and I had the girls put their social medias into private. I don't know what part of the brain is broken in my mother's brain. I had the girls block their grandmother and everything, and I'm stopping payments to anything that my mother needs. I know I need to call the cops. I just never thought I would need to call the cops on my own mother. It's been only 2 weeks since I had to cut my in-laws. I'm just exhausted, and please do not think this is a normal Hispanic thing. It's not. My aunts are amazing women, most of them also homemakers. They are actually on my side of cutting off my mother and calling the cops. They even suggested for my daughters and I to move closer to them in another state. This is just my mother being insane. Small update. We went to the police today and they took all the information I had. The officer we spoke was incredible and immediately helped my lawyer with all that was needed for a temporary RO. We'll be filing it this week and hopefully get it within the month. After we'll focus on a permanent RO. This is on my mother and any third parties on her behalf. The officer was also kind enough to offer to check on us and our house at least once a day. School has also been notified of the situation, and one of my brothers is going to come live with my daughters and I until we decide if/where/when we move. I can't just up and pack everything since I still have a job and my girls are in the middle of the school year. For now, we're safe and my girls have new phone numbers. Update? So, some good news came out today regarding my mother. As of November 2024, she will be on her own monetarily. There's also an investigation on her regarding what she tried to do to my daughters, and a very old investigation reopened about a family matter I can't really speak on for the time being. Because of the charges on my mother, we might get an expedite on that restraining order since there's minors involved, so fingers crossed. The RO will also keep some others from contacting me, mainly in-laws. On other news, after talking to my daughters, the 3 of us agree we don't really like our house anymore. It makes me a bit sad because it was my childhood home and a gift from my dad. But the reality is there's too much baggage. I look at some places and it feels like the ghost of my husband's infidelity is everywhere. My girls don't like that we're so close to their grandparents, and my brother who's moved in with us has been very blunt about the fact that the house is just not worth the stress. So, as painful as it is, I'm planning to do some repairs and either sell or rent it out. It's a big house, 9 bedrooms, so far more space than we ever need. I'll be happy with half that so my girls can have their own room and I can have an office. My brother will also stay living with us after we move. Not sure if it's a forever situation, but he's a good support for my eldest daughter when it comes to LGBTQ+ matters. I have to admit I know the bare facts. While my brother is gay and came out almost 30 years ago, he's been a fount of advice about resources and given her advice, especially after my mother's stunt. My youngest has also started to do better. She's back to talking as usual and seems less scared about going out. She's been very excited about looking for a new house with me. She wants the perfect yard, so we'll see what we can find. My job offered a transfer out of state, also an international transfer, but that one is more likely a no for me, so a new beginning will do us good. That's all what I got. Not much actual updates as much as settling my mind on some decisions after reading advice here and talking it through with people in my life. As of November, I'm officially refusing to acknowledge my mother. As far as I know, my parents were gone after my father died. Update 2. This is a small update, but wanted to let everyone know we're doing okay. I still can't share many details, but we finally have a court date for the restraining order. It took longer than I expected, but things have been somewhat quiet. I'll let you all know more when I can. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.